Newsom is attorney at law. We've been working together almost since I got into real estate. You set up, not my first entity, but all the others since. Whenever Jack and I started doing raising private money, you're who we called and sat down with you. Make sure, like, pretty much like, what can we do and not get, without getting thrown in jail? We're like, do this, don't do this. Yep. Which is pretty much, just be honest with people. Don't go doing all this public marketing and all that kind of stuff. So why is Steve here? So recently, I've been lending more. Okay, and so sometimes when I lend, I use my own cash, but more frequently when I do lending, I use my private lender's cash. Okay, why is this really important? Probably everybody in here, I'm assuming, that's focused on real estate investing is trying to raise private money. Am I right? Hopefully so, because that's critical, fundamental to your business. So the last thing that you want to do is raise money and get a private lender relationship, and then you lose them. What is that noise? Can we kick it or something? So last thing you want to do is raise money, you get a good private lender relationship, and then they leave because you don't keep them busy enough or whatever reason. So a few years ago we started really creating that situation where we had more money available than we could use. Well, so what did we start doing? You spend all this time cultivating a relationship with lenders, and your lenders, they trust you. And I have certain lenders, like, they only want to loan to me. And that's great, and it's fine, but there's like a line. And so it's not good for them for the returns, because the last thing you want, if you're trying to invest money, is just have it sitting. And months and months and months at a time. So years ago I started loaning it out, basically brokering it kind of to my students, and handshake agreements are great, right? I was like, hey man, like, this is my lender, like, this is my lender. I'm letting you use them now, but they're mine. People are people. People go around and and stuff happens. So I started going to my lenders. I was like, hey, this is my bar, pretty much. I'm like, I'm being the middleman and I'm being compensated for. I understand that, but I appreciate, if you come to me first, ask me. And most of them have. It happened just last month. They're like, hey, the student's coming to me. And so I had to call them. I'm like, what's up, man? Oh, and it was pretty much like, see, what had happened was, I thought you meant the other lender, not this one. And I was like, all right, man, just don't do it again. We're still good, but don't do it again. So I called Steve, and this is, y'all need to write Steve's information down, because this is what I'll do a lot of times. I'll like, Steve, I want to do this. How can we do it? And that's a really good way to phrase a question, because some attorneys will tell you, oh, you can't do that. But Steve will take the time, like, well, let's think about that and see how it's possible to do it. Occasionally you may say, no, you can't do it, but you're usually really good about fixing problems.
That's a great thing about real estate and real estate lending and real estate investing is you can be really creative if you take the time to think outside the box a little bit. And I haven't been a lawyer my whole life. I actually was in the business world. I was an engineer. I had a consulting business. And so I tend to think outside the box because of my background a lot. So Brant would come to me and he'd have some weird situation. He'd say, well, what can he do? And so we'd sit down and we'd think about different ways of doing it. And I've been a real estate investor too. And I've had to be creative when I was investing in real estate. And so I kind of know where it's coming from. And so we come up with a plan, and usually we can come up with some way to do it, even though it's a little unconventional. But it works.
Yeah, and so as we progress as real estate investors, I told Steve, I called him about my problem. I was like, and he knows that I was working my lenders. I was like, hey, one of my students, or old friends, I should say, went around again. It's kind of frustrating. And he mentioned, he's like, why don't you use this, collateral transfer of a note structure? And so I was like, well, tell me about that. And he's like, well, this is basically what a lot of hard money lenders do and big lenders.
Yeah. Basically what it is and I'm gonna try and do an analogy to make it simpler to understand, okay? But what the lender, what you're doing is, Brant is gonna loan money to me to go buy a house and rehab it, right? Private money loan, just straight, regular deal, okay? But then he's gonna have Joe, okay, who's gonna loan him the money to loan to me, okay? But what's Joe's problem? Joe's problem is, well, what if he doesn't pay me? What can I do? I don't have a lien on the house, so I can't foreclose on the house. And so what you do is that Brant takes the note that he has from me, okay, and he says to Joe, he says, Joe, if I don't pay you, then you can foreclose on the note with Steve. So then Joe becomes the owner of the note, and therefore he's secured on the property because the note's secured on the property. So it's like an indirect way of a lender being secured on the property. It's just that Brant's in between with the note. And so that's the security. The security is not directly the property. The security is the note that is secured on the property. Okay? So it's not really that complicated, and it allows the lender to have security, because what we do is we draft up documents. So some of the documents, for example, is there's going to be a loan agreement. Okay? The loan agreement with Joe is the same thing as the note between Brant and me. Okay? And then, you have a deed of trust, right? Okay, the deed of trust secures the note that Brant gave me, or that I gave Brant, on the property. That's the deed of trust. Well, there's a document called a collateral transfer of note and lien. That's the same thing as a deed of trust, only instead of on the piece of property, it's on the note. So you have it's the same type of transaction. Again, it's just that you don't have the lender. Joe doesn't have a direct lien on the property. It's an indirect one, because then he would have to take the note, step into Brant's shoes, and then he would collect. Joe would collect the payments. And if the payments aren't made from the homeowner or me, okay, then he could foreclose on the property because he now owns the note. So you see how that works? So conceptually it's pretty simple. It's just there's one extra person in the middle. And so what happens with a lot of hard money lenders and in a lot of big deals, this happens, with big companies and stuff, is that it keeps the money working. Okay. And so that's why a lot of them do it. And it provides Brant, or the person that's trying to put the money to work, with more money. Because then there's people that are willing to do that. So anyway, what we've done is we've taken this concept that usually is done for big banks and things like that, and we brought it down to the single family home, transactions. So that's kind of how we came about it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And so, just real simple, you're typically a lender loans money to a borrower, right? This is our structure. So here's what we're doing. This is another benefit of it for our lenders, and then for you guys is essentially the entrepreneur. Like I said, some of my lenders I've been working with for 10, 11 years. And so for me, whenever I started essentially helping them to loan to other people, a lot of them really didn't like it at first, and some of them still don't. They're like, well, we want to loan to you, Brant. We want to loan to Invest Home Pro because they know me, they're comfortable with that. So I was spending a lot of time, going to bat for the borrowers. And I vet my borrowers good and have a 100% track record. But it's a lot of time and effort. And hey, they're a good person. They're going to pay, I hope. But I don't know if they are, but I'm assuming that they are, and it's a good deal. And so I've done my best to only do loans on deals that I would personally take back if it came to that. But so what this has done is essentially now my lender, for them, instead of dealing with just some random person they don't know, now the borrower, is my company, Invest Home Pro. So when they're lending to me. They may or may not even know who the borrower is at all. So what am I doing? So that lender is going to entrust me with this money because Steve's going to secure it, right? Like what the paperwork is going to secure it. And then so then IHP is here now, which is Invest Home Pro. And so that I'm going to have a separate set of loan documents. and I'm going to loan to the borrower, okay? So I'm going to loan to this borrower. So this borrower is responsible to me. They're making payments. I'm making payments to this person, okay? Now, if this person doesn't perform, if they default, if there's a hurricane or whatever, then who's responsible for paying them? Still me. And so, you know, I didn't like, when I was coordinating this, like thinking to myself, did this person pay? And I had that happen. Hey, so-and-so's late. Now I'm the middleman and I don't have any control, and I didn't like that. So now I know if they're getting paid. With our systems, if we've received that check or not, our stuff always gets set up on auto bill pay to our lenders, and I encourage all you guys to do that. Pay your lenders early. So I know that I'm paying them no matter what. If this deal goes bad, if this deal goes sideways, if they don't perform, guess what? They're never going to know about it. And they ask me, but I'm just going to pay them and I'm going to handle this so it gives more peace of mind for me, more peace of mind for them. It unclutters the whole process, and then it keeps I'm able to deploy more of my private lenders' money to keep it working so I keep them happy with me. And it's an income stream for me. My lenders know. Let's say if I have a lender that says, hey, Brant, I want 10% at 1 point. Well, I'm going to charge 12% in 2 points or 3 points, or depending on the deal. Depending on who it is, I may charge 3 or 4 points. If it's someone I don't know, if there's more risk, it just depends. So that's why we're doing it with this structure.
And there are some advantages to the lender who's loaning to Brant, and he just mentioned some of them, but they have more security, because if you think about it, that lender now has 2 people on the hook to pay them, right? They've got Brant, who's on the hook to pay them. If anything goes wrong, they don't get paid. Brant's company is liable to them, okay? And then they've also got the borrower on the property, because if they take the note, then they get the borrower, and the borrower has to pay them. So they actually have 2 people that are now liable to pay that note, okay? And so they would have to have 2 people default in order for them to get in trouble. And then if both people default, then they get the property, right, through a foreclosure. So it's, you know, they actually have more security to it this way because there's more people liable to pay it.
So I just want to share that with you guys. If you're raising money, I'm not telling you guys to go become lenders, but if you start raising it at, you know, a higher capacity, a higher level, then it's just something to think about.
And this isn't something we just made up, okay? This has been around. We've just, you know, I've just kind of brought it down to a smaller level, to where we're doing it on smaller deals, on single family, instead of just being done on hotels and stuff like that, okay? So it's not something we just concocted. This is a thing that's been around for a while. It just hasn't been at the small investor level very much, and now we're doing it that way.
Okay, a couple of
questions. It's essentially a wrap.
No, it's not a wrap. It's 2 totally separate loans. Not a wrap at all.
Okay.
What do you have? What did you call it again?
Collateral transfer of note and lien.
Okay, was there another question?
Yeah, right. Have you had a borrower default, and how did you make up?
I've never had a borrower default. I've had somebody
What's your
late.
plan set for it that does happen?
I'll take over the loan. Like, so I've done close to 300 deals, right? And so I've always performed on every single one of my deals. And there were times, right, when I was first starting out, and I got stuck in situations that were very, very difficult. But going back to when I first got in this business, when I first started raising private money, I remember I had some lenders, and they're like, we like you, Brant, we want to invest with you. I remember going home and telling my wife about it, and she's like, man, that's awesome. But I felt like this enormous amount of pressure on my shoulders because it's a big responsibility. And I told my wife, I was like, I'm nervous because they're putting their hard-earned retirement money, their wealth, everything that they have, and entrusting me with it. And I said, if anything goes wrong, babe, I'm like, we'll sell our house, we'll sell our car, I'm gonna make it happen. So, you know, I hope a borrower never defaults, and I've never had one even owner finance, but whenever it happens, I'll take care of that situation. And another part to that question, and this is really, really, really important for me, I'm only lending on deals that I would personally invest in. The properties I mentioned earlier, well, there's some exceptions, but for the most part, what we're lending on is our cookie cutter
Right.
suburbs homes, loans that are less than $200,000. We can rent them, flip them, owner finance them, wholesale them. So I give myself exit strategies. We are controlling the draws. We're dispersing those accordingly. So we're protecting ourselves.
So if you needed to come in,
Yeah.
you could just pick up.
Yeah.
It makes sense.